It was barely past 8 when I heard shouting outside our front door. I opened the blinds, and there she was, Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, wagging her finger at my wife, Emily, like she was scolding a child. The crime, having too many packages stacked neatly on our porch. This is against HOA rules. You're making the neighborhood look like a warehouse, she barked, loud enough for the whole block to hear. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that Emily wasn't just my wife. She was a federal prosecutor who'd sent men twice Karen's size to prison with a single sentence. And that morning, Karen had just delivered her loudest complaint, straight to the last person she should ever mess with. I've lived in my share of neighborhoods, big cities, small towns, you name it, but nothing quite compares to the strange little universe of a homeowners association. You'd think living in a well-manicured, tree-lined community would be peaceful. You'd think neighbors would be friendly, maybe wave when you walk your dog, and for the most part, they are. But then there's always one. In our case, that one was Karen. We'd only been in this neighborhood for about 8 months. My wife, Emily, and I had fallen in love with the place. Instantly quiet streets, wide sidewalks, maple trees that turned fiery red in the fall. It was the kind of community where folks left Christmas lights up a little too long and nobody minded. Or at least, that's what we thought. Karen was the HOA president, and she wore that title like a crown. Mid-50s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was part of her anatomy. She had a voice that could cut through a brick wall and an uncanny ability to appear exactly when you didn't want her to. Emily, on the other hand, was the polar opposite, calm, collected, and sharp as a razor. She worked as a federal prosecutor, which meant she spent her days dealing with hardened criminals, high-profile fraud cases, and people who thought they were untouchable. She'd seen it all, and because her work involved sensitive cases, she often received documents, exhibits, or sealed packages directly at our home. That week had been especially busy. Several upcoming trials meant a constant flow of deliveries. That morning, the FedEx truck had come by twice, UPS once, and our regular postal carrier had dropped off a couple of certified letters. By the time Emily had finished her second cup of coffee, there were 6 neatly stacked packages by the door. To us, it was nothing unusual. To Karen, it was apparently a declaration of war on the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. I first heard her before I saw her. The sound was unmistakable, her heeled shoes clicking up our walkway, followed by that sharp, nasal tone. Emily, this is completely unacceptable. I stepped into the front hall just in time to see her pointing dramatically at the packages, as if they were radioactive. You can't have this many boxes sitting out here, she went on. It's against HOA guidelines. We have to maintain a certain visual standard, and this makes your house look like a shipping depot. Emily, who had been signing for yet another envelope, simply raised an eyebrow. Good morning to you too, Karen, she said, her voice calm enough to make me smirk. But Karen wasn't having it. She jabbed at her clipboard, flipping through papers. I'll be issuing a written notice, and if this continues, the HOA will fine you heavily. Now, I should explain, Karen didn't just dislike rule breakers. She thrived on enforcing rules that barely existed. She once fined another neighbor for leaving a garden hose coiled incorrectly. Another family was forced to repaint their front door because the shade of blue wasn't in the approved palette. And now, she'd decided that having a few extra deliveries was some kind of community crisis. I stood behind Emily, ready to step in, but my wife didn't need rescuing. She simply smiled in that way I've seen her do in court, the kind of smile that says, I'm 3 steps ahead of you, and you don't even know it yet. Karen, Emily said softly, are you telling me the HOA has an official policy on the number of packages a homeowner can receive? Karen blinked, clearly not expecting the question. It's implied in the guidelines. Excessive deliveries attract theft. And could you point me to the exact clause? Emily interrupted, still polite but with that subtle edge. Karen's lips tightened. It's common sense, Emily. Emily nodded slowly, as if she were making a mental note. All right, please send me the written policy. I'll be happy to review it. Karen let out a short, exasperated laugh. You lawyers and your loopholes. Emily didn't flinch. I do enjoy the law, she said, picking up the top package and carrying it inside. And I take rules very seriously, when they actually exist. The conversation ended there, but not before Karen shot me a look, that kind of smug. You'll regret this look. Then she clicked her way back down the sidewalk, muttering something under her breath. As soon as the door shut, I turned to Emily. So, are you just going to let that go? She set the package on the kitchen counter, still smiling. Oh, I'm not letting it go, she said, reaching for her coffee. But it's too early in the game to move. Let her think she's in control for now. That's when I knew Karen had just stepped into a ring she didn't even realize existed. And Emily. She was about to run the match. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. 2 days later, the envelope showed up. It wasn't the usual white HOA newsletter or a reminder about lawn maintenance. No, this one was bright yellow, stamped Notice of Violation in bold red letters, like we'd just committed a federal offense. It had been slid under our door, which meant Karen had walked right up to our porch again, something the HOA rules themselves forbid without homeowner consent. The irony was almost too good. I picked it up and read it aloud over breakfast. Per HOA guidelines. Section 14, subsection C. Excessive and repeated deliveries are prohibited if deemed disruptive to neighborhood appearance and safety. That last part, if deemed, was the giveaway. It wasn't an actual rule. It was a vague clause Karen had twisted into her personal weapon, and at the bottom was her signature in oversized cursive, followed by a threat $500 fine for each future violation. Emily didn't react the way most people would. No slammed fists, no raised voice. She simply sipped her coffee and said, Interesting. I'll keep this. Now, I've been married to this woman long enough to know what that meant. She wasn't brushing it off. She was archiving it, mentally slotting it into her growing case file. But Karen didn't stop at the letter. That afternoon, our neighbor Mark from across the street dropped by. He's the kind of guy who always knows what's going on, partly because he's nosy and partly because people can't help but talk to him. Hey, he said, lowering his voice. Karen's been telling folks you two are running some kind of home business. Says you've got boxes coming in and out like a warehouse. Emily glanced up from her laptop. Did she say what kind of business? Mark shook his head. No, but you know how people are. Once she plants the seed, they start making up their own details. I've already heard one neighbor say you're importing knockoff handbags. Emily's eyebrow arched in amusement. Well, that's creative. It didn't stop there. The next day, I came home to find Karen and 2 other HOA board members standing at the edge of our driveway with clipboards. They weren't even trying to be discreet. They were photographing the packages on our porch like they were gathering evidence for a trial. I stepped out onto the front walk. Can I help you? Karen didn't look up from her clipboard, just documenting for the record. We've had multiple complaints about the frequency of deliveries here. From who I asked, she smiled that tight, fake smile. The HOA doesn't disclose complainant identities. It's for community safety. I almost laughed. Right, safety. Emily stepped outside then, holding her phone like she'd been recording the whole thing, which, knowing her, she probably had. Karen, she said evenly, you are aware that you're trespassing. Correct. HOA members are not authorized to enter private property without the owner's consent. Karen waved a hand dismissively. Oh, we're just on the driveway. That's common area. Emily tilted her head. Actually, the property line extends to the sidewalk. This is all private. I can show you the deed if you like. That got Karen to step back half a pace, but she didn't admit defeat. You can lawyer all you want, Emily, but this neighborhood has rules, and if you don't follow them, there will be consequences. Emily smiled faintly. I'm counting on that. Later that night, as we sat on the back porch, I asked her why she hadn't just shut Karen down right then and there. She took a slow sip of iced tea before answering. Because she's building my case for me, Emily said. Every word she says, every false claim, every time she steps onto this property, it's all evidence. And when I move, I want her so far out on the limb that she saws it off herself. The thing is, Emily didn't just know the law, she understood people. She knew Karen's type. The more you push back too early, the more they dig in. But if you let them think they're winning, they overplay their hand. And sure enough, the next morning, Karen took it up another notch. I was on my way to get the mail when I saw her standing with two neighbors at the corner of the street, talking animatedly and gesturing toward our house. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she smiled like nothing was wrong and waved. That evening, an email blast went out to the entire neighborhood from the HOA board. The subject line, Package Policy Enforcement. The body of the email claimed there had been recent incidents of excessive deliveries attracting suspicious individuals and urged everyone to report similar violations as immediately. There were no names, of course, but everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Emily read the email once, then closed her laptop. She just made her first public misstep, she said calmly. I leaned back in my chair, meaning Emily looked up at me with that same courtroom smile I'd seen 100 times. Meaning she just moved from petty nuisance to actionable defamation. And I swear, the way she said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Karen thought she was tightening the noose, but Emily was the one holding the rope. The email had been bad enough, but it was nothing compared to what came next. 2 days later, we got a printed notice taped to our mailbox post. It was a summons not from the court, but from the HOA board for a special disciplinary meeting to discuss repeated violations of community policy regarding excessive deliveries. It read like something out of a crime drama formal language, bullet points, and the unmistakable tone of Karen behind every word. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. Attendance was mandatory for all parties involved. Emily just smiled when she read it. Perfect, she said. Exactly the platform I need. I couldn't help but ask. You're actually going to this? Of course, she said. Why pass up the opportunity to have an audience? In the days leading up to the meeting, Karen's campaign went into overdrive. I saw her holding court with small clusters of neighbors, leaning in close and speaking in that low, conspiratorial tone that's somehow still loud enough for everyone to hear. One afternoon, I overheard her telling Mrs. Callahan, the sweet old lady who bakes cookies for everyone, that Emily was probably running an online business without a license and using the neighborhood as a distribution hub. Mrs. Callahan looked genuinely confused. But Emily's a lawyer, isn't she? Karen's eyes narrowed. Exactly. She knows how to cover her tracks. It would have been laughable if it weren't so obviously malicious. Emily didn't even flinch when I told her. She just added it to a growing folder on her laptop labeled HOA Evidence. When Thursday rolled around, we walked into the clubhouse to find nearly 24 neighbors already seated. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable, and a few Karen's loyalists wore that self-satisfied smirk of people who think they're about to witness a public shaming. Karen was at the front, flanked by 2 other board members, her trusty clipboard in hand. She tapped the microphone unnecessarily, since the room was small, and cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming, she began. As you know, we pride ourselves on maintaining the beauty, safety, and reputation of our community. Unfortunately, recent actions by one household have brought unwanted attention and potential risk to our neighborhood. All eyes turned toward us. Karen clicked her remote, and a slideshow appeared on the screen behind her photos of our porch with neatly stacked packages, taken from different angles. She had even circled the boxes in red, like she was presenting evidence in a criminal trial. These deliveries, she said, are excessive. They create visual clutter, attract porch pirates, and are in clear violation of Section 14, subsection C of the HOA guidelines. Emily raised her hand. If I may, Karen cut her off. You'll have a chance to respond at the end. Emily lowered her hand, smiling faintly. Of course. Karen went on to list possible consequences, including escalating fines, suspension of community privileges, and my personal favorite legal action to enforce compliance. She finished with a triumphant look, as if she'd just sealed the deal. When she finally said, "You may respond," Emily stood up slowly, straightening the lapels of her blazer. "Thank you, Madam President," she began. "I have a few clarifying questions before I respond to the substance of your claims." Her voice was calm but carried effortlessly across the room. "First, Could you please provide the exact wording of the HOA rule that limits the number of packages a homeowner can receive? Karen blinked. It's implied in the guidelines, so there is no explicit rule. Emily pressed gently. Karen's jaw tightened. It falls under maintaining the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. Understood, Emily said. And could you explain why photos of my private property were taken without my consent? Karen glanced nervously at one of the board members. We were documenting a violation. On private property, Emily asked, tilting her head. Because according to the plat map filed with the county, my property line extends to the sidewalk, which means those photographs were taken while trespassing. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Karen straightened. Let's not get bogged down in legalese. Emily smiled. Oh, I don't mind legalese. It's my profession. After all. That got the first real reaction, a shift in posture from half the room. Karen tried to redirect. The point is, but Emily held up a hand. Face. One last question. Are you aware that spreading false statements about a neighbor's activities, such as claiming they run an illegal business, can constitute defamation under state law? The room went silent. Karen's face flushed a deep pink. I've never, she started. Oh, you have, Emily said evenly. And I have multiple witnesses, including one in this room, who heard you say exactly that. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Karen's smirk had vanished. Emily didn't raise her voice, but she had everyone's full attention. So, to summarize, there is no explicit rule I've violated. The so-called evidence was obtained through trespassing, and multiple defamatory statements have been made against me in this community. I look forward to discussing these matters in the appropriate legal forum. She sat down, calm as you please, while the rest of the room buzzed with whispers. Karen's power in that moment deflated like a balloon with a slow leak. Karen thought she'd called a meeting to put Emily on trial. What she didn't realize was that the trial had just shifted, and she was now the one in the defendant's chair. The clubhouse meeting had ended in a low murmur of conversations, neighbors drifting out in small clusters, throwing glances back at us. Karen stayed behind, pretending to shuffle papers, her jaw tight as steel. We didn't approach her. Emily knew better than to give her another chance to say something regrettable in front of witnesses. But the next move wouldn't be in the clubhouse. 2 mornings later, Emily walked into the HOA's weekly administrative review session at the small office space they rented on Main Street. I came along, partly because she asked me to and partly because I wanted a front row seat. Karen was already there, sitting behind the desk like a small-town sheriff, guarding the county jail keys. She was mid-sentence with another board member when Emily stepped inside. Dressed not in jeans and a t-shirt like she usually did around the neighborhood, but in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Her heels clicked against the floor, and her leather briefcase looked heavy with purpose. Karen's eyes narrowed. Emily, this is a board meeting. It's for HOA business only. Emily set her briefcase on the table, calmly flipping open the brass clasps. Good, she said. This is very much HOA business. From the case. She withdrew a slim leather wallet and opened it to reveal an official badge and photo ID. The gold emblem caught the overhead light, and the bold letters spelled it out clearly. United States Department of Justice, Federal Prosecutor. The room went utterly silent. Even the ancient wall clock seemed to pause. Karen blinked, her lips parting. You're a lawyer. Emily's voice was steady, measured. Not just a lawyer. I represent the federal government in criminal prosecutions. My current caseload includes financial fraud, wire fraud, and abuse of authority. She paused just long enough for the words to settle. All crimes I have reason to believe may have been committed in connection with this HOA. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What are you talking about? Emily opened a second folder, this one thicker. During the course of documenting the harassment I've received from this association, I uncovered irregularities in the HOA's financial records, multiple disbursements with no receipts, cash withdrawals exceeding the authorized limit, and duplicate vendor payments. She slid copies across the table, each page marked with neat sticky notes. Karen stared down at the papers, her face draining of color. This is ridiculous. You can't just. Emily's tone sharpened slightly, the way it does when she's cross-examining a hostile witness. I can, and I have. These records are already in the hands of the state auditor's office and the county prosecutor. Given the amount of money involved, the case may very well fall under federal jurisdiction. Karen looked like she was shrinking in her seat. Her usual bluster was gone, replaced by the twitch of someone doing frantic mental math, the kind that ends in panic. Emily didn't let up. Additionally, I have documented incidents of trespassing, defamation, and abuse of HOA authority. Those I will be pursuing as part of a civil action, which means, Karen, you are not only potentially facing criminal investigation, you are also about to be named personally in a lawsuit. Karen tried to recover, forcing a brittle laugh. This is absurd. You're making a mountain out of. Emily leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. Karen, I've put people in federal prison for less. The board member next to Karen coughed and looked away, clearly wanting no part of this crossfire. I stayed quiet in the corner, watching the scene like it was the best courtroom drama I'd ever seen, except this one didn't have a script. This was real. And Karen was realizing she wasn't the director anymore. She wasn't even in the cast. She was the case. When Emily closed her briefcase, the sound was final, like a judge's gavel. From this point forward, she said, any communication regarding me or my household should be directed to my attorney. This meeting is concluded. Karen sat frozen, her clipboard untouched, while Emily walked to the door with the kind of composure you can't fake. I followed her out, resisting the urge to grin too widely. Once outside, I asked, so, what now? Emily glanced at her watch. Now, we let her stew. People under pressure make mistakes, and when she makes the next one, we'll be ready. Sure enough, by the end of the day, the neighborhood grapevine was buzzing. Some said Karen had been read the riot act by a government official. Others claimed the HOA was under investigation, which, for the record, wasn't entirely untrue. But the best part, Karen didn't come anywhere near our house for the rest of the week. Karen might have gone quiet, but Emily knew silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before the storm. And the storm was exactly what she was counting on. By the time the weekend rolled around, Karen's morning patrols had stopped cold. No sharp click of her heels on the sidewalk. No shadow hovering near our porch. No squinting at our packages like she was inspecting a crime scene. To a casual observer, it might have looked like she was backing off. But Emily knew better. Bullies don't just stop, she said over coffee that Saturday morning. They regroup. They pull back so they can try a bigger swing later. And if Karen was regrouping, Emily was about to outmatch her piece by piece. Emily went through our files like a seasoned detective. Every HOA letter, every email, every passive-aggressive reminder from Karen was printed and placed in clear sheet protectors. Our home security footage downloaded, labeled, and backed up in 2 separate places. The footage was pure gold clips of Karen stepping past the property line to photograph packages, videos of her and her bored allies on our driveway without permission, and even a shot of her peering into a side window when she thought no one was home. Emily also saved every copy of the neighborhood-wide package policy email and screenshots of Facebook posts in the HOA community group where Karen had hinted about illegal activity at a certain home. Emily reached out quietly to neighbors she trusted. She didn't barge in demanding loyalty. She simply asked if they'd ever had issues with the HOA. That's when the floodgates opened. Mr. Barnes, a retired Navy vet, said Karen fined him $250 for having a non-compliant mailbox, even though it was the exact model approved by the HOA. He'd paid it just to avoid the stress. The Ramirez family shared how they'd been threatened with legal action for putting up a small above-ground pool for their kids during the summer heat wave. Karen claimed it lowered property values. And Mrs. Callahan, the sweet, silver-haired neighbor who always brought us cookies, confessed that she'd been fined for having too many potted plants on her porch. She'd actually cried when she got the notice. Emily took each story down in detail, typed them up, and had the neighbors sign them. She didn't push anyone to join her fight. She just made it clear they weren't alone. That thick folder of HOA financial records Emily had found. She went through it line by line. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion, and every layer stank worse than the last. There were payments to vendors with no contracts on file, landscaping jobs billed twice, and cash withdrawals well above the authorized monthly limit. One entry was for equipment repair at $1,800, but there was no receipt, no work order, and no record of the equipment even existing. Emily was methodical. Every questionable expense was matched against the official HOA meeting minutes. If there was no approval recorded, she highlighted it in red. If there was approval but no receipt, it got a blue tab. By the time she was done, the binder looked like a rainbow of incriminating tabs. Monday morning, Emily was at the post office with a stack of large, sealed envelopes. Each one was addressed to a different office, the state's HOA Oversight Board, the county's Department of Consumer Protection, and the state auditor's office. Inside each packet was the same neat, thorough presentation timeline of incidents, photographic evidence, signed neighbor statements, and highlighted financial irregularities. I asked her, half joking, "Isn't this a little overkill? Not if she's been doing this for years." Emily said, "We're not just stopping Karen from harassing us. We're making sure she never does this to anyone else again." The effect was almost immediate. By Wednesday morning, a white sedan with a county seal pulled up outside the HOA office. Two men in suits went inside carrying clipboards. I happened to be driving past when Karen's SUV pulled in. She went inside looking brisk and confident and came out 5 minutes later pale as chalk. The very next day, Emily got an email from one of the other board members. It was short, just one line: "I didn't know about any of this. Please keep me out of it." That was the first crack in Karen's support system. That weekend, Emily hosted what she called a casual coffee chat in our backyard. She invited only a handful of people, at first the ones she trusted most, and told them to bring someone they thought might want to hear the truth. By the time the coffee urn was half empty, there were 15 people sitting in lawn chairs, sharing their own Karen stories. Some laughed, some got heated, and some shook their heads in disbelief. But by the end, one thing was clear: no one wanted Karen in charge anymore. Someone suggested a petition for a leadership vote. Emily didn't push, she just smiled and handed them a clipboard. By the time the sun dipped low, more than half the attendees had signed their names. On Monday morning, Emily sent a certified cease and desist letter to Karen. It was direct, professional, and ice cold. It listed every documented incident of harassment, trespassing, and defamation, along with a clear statement: any further action of this nature will result in both civil and potential criminal proceedings. We didn't have to wait long for the fallout. At exactly 8:15 the next morning, our doorbell camera caught Karen marching up the sidewalk, still in her robe, hair sticking out in every direction. She was holding the unopened certified letter like it was radioactive. Without ringing or knocking, she slammed it onto the porch table and stormed away. Emily watched the clip twice, her lips curling into that subtle smile I'd come to recognize. "She's rattled," she said. "Now she's going to get sloppy. And when she does, we'll be ready." What Karen didn't know was that every panicked move she made from here on out wasn't a defense. It was just more evidence in the file Emily was building. And that file was about to end her reign over the neighborhood. The next HOA general meeting was set for a Thursday evening at the community clubhouse, and you could feel the buzz in the air all week. People were talking in driveways, at the mailbox, even in the grocery store checkout line. The whispers weren't about lawn care or Halloween decorations anymore. They were about Karen. By the time we walked into the clubhouse that night, the place was packed. Every folding chair was taken, with people standing along the back wall and a few peeking in from the hallway. Karen sat at the head table in her usual spot, flanked by the two remaining board members still willing to be seen with her. Her clipboard was there, but her posture wasn't quite as rigid as usual. She looked unsettled. Emily took her seat next to me in the front row, calm as a marble statue. She'd brought her binder of evidence, a small stack of manila folders, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew the ending before the story was even halfway told. Karen opened the meeting with her usual formalities, but her voice lacked the edge it used to have. She moved quickly through landscaping reports and community events, clearly wanting to avoid the elephant in the room, but she couldn't dodge it for long. Halfway through, Mr. Barnes stood up from the middle row. His voice was steady, but loud enough to carry. "Madam President, I'd like to bring up the recent reports about our HOA's financial management." The room shifted, heads turned. Murmurs started. Karen's eyes flicked toward Emily before she forced a smile. "Mr. Barnes, we're not here to discuss unfounded rumors. They're not rumors," he said, holding up a packet of papers. "These are copies of our last 6 months of financial statements, and I've got highlighted sections here that don't add up. Cash withdrawals with no receipts, payments to companies that don't exist, and no board meeting minutes approving any of it." Karen's mouth opened, but Emily was already on her feet. "If I may," she said, stepping forward. The room quieted instantly. Emily didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through the air like a gavel strike. "Over the past 2 months, I have documented multiple incidents of misconduct by this board, including harassment of homeowners, misuse of HOA funds, and violations of state statutes governing homeowners associations." She laid a folder on the head table in front of Karen. "This is a copy of the formal complaint I have filed with the state auditor's office, complete with supporting documentation." Gasps rippled through the room. One of the board members shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Karen tried to wave it off. "This is outrageous. You can't just..." Emily opened her binder to a tabbed section and slid a photo across the table, a still image from our doorbell camera, showing Karen on our porch, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. "Trespassing. Multiple counts. Documented with time-stamped footage." She flipped to another tab. "Defamation. Witness statements from 6 separate homeowners who heard you falsely accuse me of running an illegal business from my home." The neighbors sitting behind us were leaning forward now, hanging on every word. Even those who'd once backed Karen looked uneasy. "And finally," Emily said, her tone turning razor sharp, "financial irregularities. Multiple unexplained disbursements from HOA funds, totaling over $12,000 in the past fiscal year. Funds which you, as president, had sole access to approve." Karen's face was a mask, part outrage, part panic. This is a personal attack." Emily didn't blink. "No, this is a legal matter. And as a federal prosecutor, I take legal matters very seriously." That last part landed like a thunderclap. There was a beat of stunned silence before the whisper started again, louder this time. Someone in the back muttered, "She's a federal prosecutor." Karen tried to rally. "You can't speak to me like..." But Mr. Ramirez stood up. "Actually, I think she can. And frankly, I'm tired of the way you've treated people in this neighborhood. I move that we hold a vote to remove you as president, effective immediately." Mrs. Callahan's hand shot up. "I second that," Karen sputtered. "You can't just..." But she was drowned out by the rustle of people raising their hands. The board secretary, clearly eager to be anywhere else, began counting. All in favor, nearly every hand in the room went up. Opposed, only Karen's remained. "It's decided," the secretary said. "Effective immediately. Karen is removed from the position of HOA president." Karen looked around like she couldn't believe what she was seeing, her loyalists avoiding eye contact, her authority evaporating right there under the fluorescent lights. She gathered her clipboard and papers, but her hands shook as she shoved them into her tote bag. Emily, for her part, didn't smirk or gloat. She simply picked up her binder, turned to the room, and said, "Thank you for your time. For those who wish to review the financial documents or the witness statements, I have copies available." The meeting dissolved into low chatter as people crowded around Emily's table. Karen slipped out the side door, her once commanding presence reduced to a hurried shuffle. When we walked back to our car, the crisp evening air felt lighter somehow. Mr. Barnes clapped Emily on the shoulder. "You did the neighborhood a service tonight," he said. Emily just smiled faintly. "I did my job." By the next morning, word had spread across the community like wildfire. People were stopping us at the mailbox to thank Emily, some even apologizing for believing Karen's lies. The HOA board announced a special election to replace her, and several neighbors volunteered to serve the kind of people who actually cared about community rather than control. Karen's SUV was still parked in her driveway that weekend, but the blinds stayed closed. She didn't make eye contact when she went to get her mail. By Monday, a for sale sign was staked in her yard. Bitsaoi. Karen's reign was over. But Emily wasn't done yet because the civil lawsuit was still on the horizon. And the final act was going to be the one Karen remembered for the rest of her life. Karen's removal as HOA president might have been the community's big win, but for Emily, it was just one milestone in a longer game. The civil case was still in motion, and Karen had no idea just how much damage it was going to do. The week after the vote, Emily filed the official complaint in county court. It was meticulous, a legal tapestry woven from months of documentation, trespassing incidents, defamation statements, and misuse of HOA authority. Every claim was backed with evidence, time-stamped videos, sworn witness affidavits, and HOA bylaws highlighted in fluorescent yellow. I remember Karen's reaction vividly because I saw it on our doorbell camera. A courier delivered the thick envelope to her house in the late afternoon. 10 minutes later, Karen stepped outside in a faded sweatshirt, tore the envelope open, and started flipping through the pages. Her expression went from confused to pale to outright horrified. She glanced toward our house once, then slammed the door so hard it rattled the glass. The legal process moved faster than I expected. By the end of the month, there was a preliminary hearing. Emily didn't need to be there personally. Her attorney could have handled it, but she went anyway, walking into the courthouse with that quiet, unshakable confidence that seemed to rattle Karen more than anything else. Karen, on the other hand, looked nothing like the polished, authoritative figure she used to present at HOA meetings. Her hair was flat, her blouse wrinkled, and she kept glancing nervously toward the gallery where several of our neighbors sat. I think she was hoping for support. None came. The judge didn't waste time. After reviewing the evidence, he ruled that the trespassing and defamation claims were strong enough to proceed to trial. He also ordered an immediate temporary restraining order, prohibiting Karen from coming within 100 feet of our property or contacting us directly. When Emily walked out of the courtroom, she didn't gloat. She just said, "One step at a time." In the meantime, the fallout from the financial investigation was hitting Karen from another angle. The state auditor's office had completed their review, and while they didn't yet announce criminal charges, they found enough irregularities to refer the matter to the county prosecutor. Word spread quickly. I overheard someone at the coffee shop say, "Did you hear Karen might have to pay back thousands from the HOA fund?" Someone else replied, "Serves her right. She was always acting like she owned this place." Even those who had once defended her were now avoiding her completely. Her inner circle had evaporated. 2 months after the initial hearing, the civil trial began. It wasn't long or flashy, maybe 3 hours total, but it was devastating for Karen. Emily's attorney laid out the evidence with surgical precision, each piece fitting together like a puzzle that spelled out guilty in bold letters. The doorbell footage of Karen on our property, the certified witness statements from neighbors about her false accusations, the HOA emails and Facebook posts implying illegal activity, and the kicker HOA financial records showing unexplained expenditures authorized solely by Karen. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she tried to frame it as protecting the neighborhood, but under cross-examination, she admitted there was no actual rule limiting the number of packages a homeowner could receive, no board approval for many of the fines she'd issued, and no documentation for thousands of dollars in spending. The judge's ruling was decisive. Karen was ordered to pay damages for defamation and trespassing, cover Emily's legal fees, and issue a written public apology to be circulated to all HOA members. The total financial hit just over $18,000. Karen's jaw tightened when the number was read aloud, but she didn't argue. She just sat there, staring down at the table like the fight had finally drained out of her. The apology letter arrived a week later. It was as cold and minimal as the court would allow, but it still said the words, "I acknowledge that my statements regarding Emily, last name, were false and unfounded. I regret the harm my actions caused." Emily pinned it to the corkboard in our kitchen like a trophy. "Proof," she said simply, "that sometimes the law works exactly how it should." Karen's house went up for sale not long after. She avoided neighbors, didn't attend community events, and was gone within 6 weeks. The new owners, a young couple with 2 kids, brought over a plate of brownies the first week they moved in. "We've heard about you," they said with a smile, "and we're glad you're on our side." Under the new HOA leadership, the neighborhood felt lighter. Rules were enforced fairly, communication was respectful, and the toxic cloud that had hung over our street was gone. People planted flowers again, Kids played in the cul-de-sac, and the only thing anyone argued about was which street had the best Christmas decorations. On the night Karen's for sale sign came down, Emily and I sat on the porch with mugs of coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. "You know," I said, "most people would have just paid the fines and moved on." Emily smiled faintly. "And that's why people like Karen keep doing what they do. They count on no one standing up to them." I nodded. "Do you think she learned anything?" "Maybe," Emily said. "But even if she didn't, everyone else watching did. And that's enough." Karen's name might fade from memory in this neighborhood, but the story of what happened, of how she was taken down by the very law she tried to twist, would be told for years. Some people think power comes from titles, positions, or how loudly they can shout. But real power comes from knowing your rights, standing your ground, and refusing to be bullied no matter who's doing the bullying. Emily didn't win because she yelled the loudest. She won because she was prepared, patient, and unwilling to let injustice slide. If you're facing your own Karen, whether it's in your neighborhood, workplace, or anywhere else, remember this document: everything. Know the rules better than the person trying to use them against you, and don't be afraid to push back when you're in the right. Have you ever dealt with someone abusing their authority? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might just give someone else the courage to stand up. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next time justice is served.